So, League has released a new cinematic for their new season, and if the rapidly climbing views are anything to go by, it is incredible. I mean, I myself have watched this like 20 times already. I love it so much. But here's the thing, if you don't know a lot about League's lore, you might not quite get it. And Necrit's video on the matter, that's a YouTube League lore guy, doesn't quite explain it for newbies, and who more unqualified than me to pick up the slack. And also I'm gonna give you a direction if you want to know more about League's lore, because there's a lot of very good content, from short stories to games, to just artwork to admire if you want to really immerse yourself in this world. Also, if the extent of your interaction with League lore is like arcane, this video will be perfect for you as well. I'll try not to get too mired in the details and just give you enough to understand what's going on. Let's go! Oh, BT dubs, just so you know. If you laugh at any of my jokes, you're actually obligated by law to like and subscribe, so you know, I don't want to see you in jail. Do whatever you want, I don't care. You think I care? I don't care. Do whatever. Do whatever.
Tomorrow is a hope, never a promise.
Immediately, first 3 seconds in, already got something to explain, let's go. Now that voice belongs to Lamb of the Kindred. I know I'm the one supposed to be explaining stuff, but I'll let the Kindred explain who they are, because it's very short and it's really good.
Lamb, tell me a story.
There was once a pale man with dark hair who was very lonely.
Why was it lonely?
All things must meet this man, so they shunned him.
Did he chase them all?
He took an axe and split himself in two.
So he would always have a friend.
So he would always have a friend.
In case you didn't catch that, the Pale Man is deaf, and the Kindred are his split halves, with both representing and being responsible for the two ways someone can go. Lamb represents going peacefully and accepting your fate, and Wolf represents going violently and not accepting death. You know, trying to be immortal, running away, or just fighting to the bitter end.
Go easily.
No! Thrash! Flee!
Keep this in mind, it's gonna come up later. That barbarian dude on ground's name is Tryndamere. This is the Freljord. Essentially, this is the part of League's world called Runeterra that's just, you know, Viking Land. It's shared by a bunch of tribes that are always in conflict for resources or just land disputes. This is probably just one of the disputes here between the Everosans, which is the tribe that Tryndamere now belongs to. He didn't always belong to. I'm gonna explain that later also. And some other probably nameless tribe. Maybe it's the Winter Squall, which is a rival of the Everosans, but there's no clear indication of it. The cinematic is split into 3 segments: past, present, and possible future. Tryndamere's section is the present, this part is the distant past, around the Fountain of Deasia, which is also another region in Runeterra. Okay, so Deasia. Deasia is a region that's all about nobility and honor.
Justice.
And all things bright!
And they are very mage-hating. Modern Deasia, that is, not ancient Deasia. And that's because Deasia was initially founded by refugees from the Rune Wars. Wars were waged around these artifacts called the World Runes that were extremely powerful. Couple that with then a few other things that happened later, and Deasia ended up as a mage-hating nation. And I'm talking about like Nazi levels of hate, like imprisoning people and stuff. It's pretty bad. Here we see 2 of the people that are essential to Demasia's founding, the Winged Protectors Kale and Morgana. Backstory on them is that they are twins, both birthed of the aspect of justice. Okay, very quickly, what is an aspect? Aspects are stellar beings that generally represent a concept. Like we have the aspect of war, we have the aspect of twilight, and we have the aspect of justice. And sometimes these aspects choose someone to become their host, and then this person will then embody and champion whatever their aspect is. Mihira climbed up to Mount Targon, which is how you become an aspect. I mean, there are other ways to become an aspect. This is just the one that's most talked about in lore. Mount Targon is like an extremely tall and nearly impossible to climb mountain. The tallest in Runeterra, I believe. And it's like a gateway to Targon Prime, which is like a city of divine entities and gods. And since she was pregnant at the time, some of that power probably trickled down to her daughters. I mean, probably. They have fucking wings, of course it did. So because Mihira essentially got very obsessed with her duty, which was dispensing justice, and she thought of it as like a way to create a good world for her daughters, started essentially ignoring her family, so her husband took the daughters away and moved to the place that would eventually become Deasia, where the twins grew up. Eventually, Mihiro's sword fell from the sky. The twins each took a half, which is the swords that they're both wielding right now, and they become protectors of the city. Thing is, although Kayle was very excited at the opportunity to follow in her mother's footsteps, Morgana kind of rejects her divine nature, which, by the way, is why she looks so different from Kayle. While Kayle's wings are pure and her magic is golden and light and whatever, Morgana, because of her rejection of her divine nature, that ended up turning her magic kind of dark and twisted. That's gonna come up later, by the way, so keep that in mind. So, this is the twins protecting Deasia from an outside invader. God, all the shots in this video are so good! Look at this, it's so cool! I'm sorry. Look, I've been following League lore since I was a preteen. Seeing this kind of shit just gets me so hyped. So, who's this guy? This is Aatrox. Aatrox is a Darkin. What the f is a Darkin? Darkin are god warriors from an ancient empire called Shurima. Think of Shurima as Egypt land. This is how I'm gonna explain all regions. Essentially, Shurima had knowledge from the Celestials. You know, the ones we've talked about before from Targon. And the ancient Shrimans created the Sun Disk, which channels the divine energy of the Celestials, and through ritual can then imbue them into a person. That person will then ascend, become an Ascended, which is essentially a god warrior that is extremely powerful. Shurima was an empire. It wanted to conquer land. It got into conflict with another place called Ikafia. Ikafia then unleashed an extra-dimensional power called the Void, which essentially started a very long and traumatic war. This essentially ended with the fall of Shurima and scarred every single Ascended. Through all these scars, through the use of blood magic, and just, you know, natural greed, they eventually became kind of corrupted and became known as the Darkin. The Darkin kind of became everyone's problems, and then the Targonians devised some magic to trap all the Darkins inside their weapons. So, the Darkin now, they're essentially living weapons. If you grab the weapon, they're gonna push their will into you and take you over, possess you. Some people can resist it, like Cain and Varus to some extent, but if you can't resist it, the Darkin takes over and transforms your body into like a corrupted mockery of their initial like holy form. So what that means is that the Darkin are now immortal and are trapped in their weapons and live an existence of pain and trauma. Alright, that's all well and good, but who is Aatrox and what does he want? Well, Aatrox was a general in the Shuriman armies, and what he wants is to die. What Aatrox is essentially trying to do is the longest and slowest suicide in history. And that's pretty much it, actually. That's his character. He was a noble general, turned evil warlord, turned suicide boy. But you can kinda see how complicated it is to die while being immortal, right? So, his solution is that he figured if he destroy everything, then he will also die. Honestly, it doesn't make that much sense, but the man's desperate. What can you do? Some people call this like a judgy look that Kayle gives Morgana here. I don't think it's that. I think she just got fucking bodied and she's like, oh, what the f is happening? Okay, so this look. Much has been made of this look. People think it's a look of disgust, and that was my initial reaction as well, but the more I look at it, the less it looks like disgust to me. Now, this could be just, you know, resting bitch face, which would be a good portrayal of Kayle's character, as someone who's so obsessed with duty to the detriment of her own personal relationships, to the point that she can't even spare a thoughtful glance to her sister who's very hurt and just screamed in pain, you know? And I would like to point out, Kayle does care about Morgana. There's a lot of misconception when it comes to the two, and that's mostly because they have a falling out later in the story, but by this point in the canon lore, it is necessary for the falling out to happen that the two are in good terms. There is a reason why it might be a look of disgust though. Remember what I said before about how Morgana's rejection of her divine nature affects her magic? Well, that would essentially mean that Morgana's magic is pretty much a constant reminder to Kayle about how her twin rejects the most important thing to her, their duty, their mother, their nature. Well, when you take that into account and how important Kayle's duty is to her, you can understand how Kayle might look down on her sister for rejecting their purpose. So that might be why it's a look of disgust. I'm not convinced, but that might just be me. Conceptually, the sisters also represent different aspects of justice. Kayle is punitive justice, and Morgana is all about redemption and empathy. And that is reflected in both their personalities and powers. In one of Morgana's stories, you can see that she can make people feel others' pain. So I wonder if here, when she uses her powers in Aatrox, she can actually feel his pain. Because he is in constant pain. He hates existing. Just like me, for real. Also, whenever a champion does anything in the cinematics, feel free to assume it's one of their in-game abilities, because it pretty much always is. We see Aatrox's body burning away here, but his sword remains, which means he's alive. Remember, he is his weapon. And that's another thing with the Darkin, or at the very least Aatrox. He's so powerful that he always ends up consuming his host. So whenever somebody picks him up, and he possesses them, he's on a time limit. And one of the ways he can increase this time limit is by killing people and consuming their bodies with blood magic. It's almost like some kind of fucked up arcade game. And if his body is completely consumed, he goes back to just being a sword without any agency in the world. Except his consciousness remains, so he gets to suffer the whole time, having no hands or feet or eyes or ears or anything except his thoughts. Just like me, for real. And once again, keep this in mind, it will come up later. Alright, now we're in the new region, Ionia. So, what is Ionia? You know how classic medieval fantasy is Europe land? Well, Ionia is Weebland. Asia land, if you will. That sounds very racist. Anyways, there's lots of ninjas, monasteries, martial arts, mass like Kabuki mass, a lot of mysticism, and a very heavy emphasis in balance, which is one of the main core themes of pretty much every Ionian story. 12 years ago, Ionia was invaded by Noxus. Though that's a bit wibbly-wobbly. Noxus is an empire that's always expanding, and is a very egalitarian place that prides itself on being an actual meritocracy. At least after they changed leaders, but that's a whole other thing. Anyways, that invasion has left the people of Ionia very scarred, which creates the perfect setting for showcasing the theme I said earlier, because a lot of people are now very unbalanced, to the detriment of their own very important duties that they should be focusing on. Oh geez, I wonder why I said that specifically. So, this guy's Yasuo. Now, you might be a little confused here because if you've seen anything of Yasuo, he is not an old man. According to the people behind the cinematic, this is a vision given to Yasuo by the Kindred, depicting a future where he lets his guilt consume him to the point where he essentially gives up on living, giving up on ambition, love, and everything else. But, you ask me, guilt for what? Both Yasuo and his older brother Yone were apprenticed to Master Soma, a swordsman who was master of the legendary wind technique. Eventually, during the Noxian invasion, Yasuo wanted to do more and wanted to defend Ionia. So when he heard a battle nearby, he left his master's side, which wasn't supposed to do, and when he came back, Master Soma was dead. And Master Soma had been killed seemingly by someone using a wind technique, so everybody blamed Yasuo, and his brother Yone chased Yasuo as he ran away, and both clashed. Yasuo killed his brother, and ended up wandering the land as a fugitive for a crime he didn't commit and living with the guilt of killing his brother. So, Yasuo has a lot of baggage. Eventually he finds some solace in the Rune King game, so if you want more about Yasuo, definitely play the Rune King game. It's a very good RPG. And go watch the cinematic, it's amazing. And read the short stories. Look, all of League's short stories are amazing, you should go read all of them. Seriously. League's stupid ass dumb troglodyte fanbase that doesn't know how to read, never read the short stories even though they were made by amazing writers, so you should go give them some love. So this is what would happen if Yasuo went back on all the progress he did. I love how it clearly hurts him to even just pick up the sword again. So people have pointed out how he doesn't actually kill anyone here, but I haven't seen people talk about why a lot, and there's multiple reasons as to why that might be. Maybe the generational Ionian trauma of the blood spill during the Noxian invasion has made him hesitant to spill more Ionian blood. Maybe his shame is so great he can't even spill the blood of evildoers anymore. Or maybe it's something that he has always kinda done, but it's so arbitrary that I can't tell if it's supposed to have any meaning here or not. Or maybe at the twilight of his life he has finally found balance, because showing mercy to evildoers is very much a balanced thing in Ionia. But the fact that he isn't killing anyone, it's very important because it determines something else that people haven't talked about a lot that happens next. So, as the bandit leader is fleeing, Yasuo does see the arrows come, and even though he does, he decides to throw a hurricane out instead of putting up his wind wall to protect himself. Why is that? I think it's because the arrows would seemingly also hit the bandit leader, and because Yasuo isn't killing anyone, he decides to save the bandit leader by throwing him out of the way, even though he knows he won't have time to put his wind wall up, which will condemn him to his death. That's why him not killing people is very important. And as we see, he accepts his death. I will say though, this is just my interpretation, and it's kind of a heroic end to Yasuo, but cinematic directors did say this was supposed to be like a bad ending for Yasuo where he gives up. So maybe he actually did have time to put the wind wall up, but you know, he gave up. And one of the incoming arrows is actually Lamb's arrow. Because remember, Lamb takes away the people who have accepted their deaths. And in the shadows, the wolf lurks, waiting in case Yasuo hadn't accepted his death and wanted to resist. And we return to the present with Tryndamere alone, because the bandits didn't like him and left. Oh, but Death knows how it feels to be alone, so they came to make him company. So they all begin fighting, and if you've been paying attention, you have noticed something very cool about this fight, which is because Tryndamere is resistant, the kill belongs to the wolf, while the lamb only shoots sometimes as a way to ask, okay, ready to die now? What about now? How about now? Now? So we see Tryndamere's eyes glow red here. Now, let me give you Tryndamere's backstory. Tryndamere was part of a tribe that was completely annihilated by Aatrox. Well, not completely. There were some survivors, and even though Tryndamere had come face to face with Aatrox for some reason spared Tryndamere. People speculate that Aatrox actually infused Tryndamere with blood magic in order to one day make Tryndamere into a good host for Aatrox. However, that is not confirmed, that is very much speculation, but it's pretty much heavily implied that that's the case. Anyways, whether it was intentionally or not, this encounter with Aatrox and his blood magic somehow gave Tryndamere some pretty crazy abilities. He heals really fast, and when he gets really angry, he gets super strong and is pretty much almost impossible to kill. This is pretty much a reference to his ultimate in-game, which is the Undying Rage, which stops him from dying. I don't know why I felt the need to explain that to you. It's an explained video, damn it. I have to explain everything. And it seems like that ability also kind of works the same way in the lore, because when he starts fighting Death, somehow Death can't seem to take him. The man just can't die, he's too angry. So, the red in Tryndamere's eyes is him entering his Undying Rage. I really love the scene because it makes so much sense for the guy with the Undying Rage to literally face Death. This is my interpretation of it. I like to think that every time Tryndamere does enter his Undying Rage, he has to face Kindred, because essentially he is going against Death, so it makes sense. Lamb does his little head turn, because he is kind of magically unable to die because of blood magic, and I think that's probably a little confusing to the Kindred, who, you know, are probably accustomed to not having much trouble with people. Surprise, surprise, he wasn't just fighting the Kindred, he was actually still fighting the other bandits. He was very much fighting both metaphorically and literally, or maybe he was also fighting the Kindred in the spirit realm literally, and not just metaphorically. It doesn't matter, it's both. That's the fun with Kindred. They're a personification of a concept. It's both literal and not, because magic. That's the fun thing about fantasy. With Tryndamere's tribe essentially decimated, he decides that they need to be incorporated into a bigger tribe to survive. But nobody wants to accept extra mouths to feed. Except Ashe sees him, and Ashe is in a complicated position because everybody thinks she's a reincarnation of a legendary hero called Avarosa. There you go. And now she has a coalition of tribes, and everybody expects her to marry one or more of the other tribal leaders. War mothers can take more than one husband, but she figures that by taking more than one husband, the conflict would just boil inside her own household, whatever that means. And if she takes only one, the others will feel slighted. So her solution is choosing Tryndamere, incorporating his tribe into her own. I don't know how this avoids anyone feeling scorned. Actually, I think everybody would be much angry that she chose some random outsider instead of one of the important tribes. But hey, whatever. Pop off, queen, I guess. I would have gone the Heron route, but that's just me. Hunky shield maidens and Vikings. Anyways, but with time they grow fond of each other. I mean, just look at the puppy eyes he makes. Oh, by the way, people think Ashe is a reincarnation of a hero because of her bow, which did belong to Avarosa and is made of true ice. Normal people can't touch true ice or they die. You have to be an iceborn, you know, special Freljordian person with magical resistance to cold and ice. If you see a champion from the Freljord shirtless, it's because they're an iceborn and they can take it. So there's a lore reason for it. Except for Tryndamere, as far as I know, he's not an iceborn, he's just cool. And there you go. That's the still hear cinematic. I didn't get too much into it, but if you pay attention to the lyrics of the song, they line perfectly with certain moments in the video that it's almost as the characters are singing it. It's amazing, it's just so fucking good. Oh, hope that helped if you didn't know anything about League. I feel like I meandered a lot. Alright, that's it.
Are you sure you want to do this? So you jump and attempt to carve your way down the mountain by digging your axe into the rock. You're going to die. From above, you all see your friend fall into the river below